All right, 6 trig functions. So here are the 6 trig functions: sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, cotangent. So the top 3 are the basics: sine, cosine, tangent. So we have sine, cosine, tangent. All right, and these are their ratios. Their definition: sine is just the ratio of the opposite of an angle over the hypotenuse, the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and tangent is the opposite over adjacent. So it's just knowing those 3. And if you look at these 3 down here, they're just the reciprocal of these 3 up here. So cosecant, hypotenuse, and opposite is the reciprocal of opposite over hypotenuse. Same with secant and cosine, and tangent and cotangent. So if you know these 3 up here, then these 3 are just those reversed. Now, there's dumb little tricks to remember. All right, so one of the dumb tricks is knowing sa, ga, toa. So this is what people use traditionally: SOHCAHTOA, sine, opposite over hypotenuse, cosine, adjacent over hypotenuse, tangent, opposite over adjacent. Now the hard part is there's no real trick when it comes to cosecant, secant, cotangent. So the only trick I've ever learned is this. If you know these 3, my wife just texted me, look. All right, so if you look at these 3, so I know sine if I remember cosecant. So cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So I CSC for cosecant. So what I like to do is, the trick is this. I can also write CSC down. So CSC on top is cosecant and CSC the other way is down. And what that does is, if I remember CSC, even if I don't remember the other 2, and I can't remember what those stand for, what I'll see later on is I know secant will pop up on a test. I know cotangent will pop on the test. So it'll at least help you at least remember what they're going to be. So if I know sine, cosine, tangent is this, then I know these 3 are just those flipped. All right, so that's one way. The other way is what a teacher taught me a long time ago was, if you ever look at your calculator, you'll see right in the middle, it'll say sine, cosine, tangent. And so I have a teacher a long time ago, this was the teacher taught me, sine, cosine, tangent is in order. And so a teacher taught me this. She said, Oscar had a hangover on alcohol. So that's another one that a teacher taught me a long time ago. So Oscar had a hangover on alcohol. And so if I remember those, if I say, what's cosine? Cosine is Oscar had a hangover, so a adjacent over hypotenuse. And then cosecant, same idea. Remember, I told you, like CSC. So if you remember CSC for the first one, and then CSC will help you find the other 2 later on. All right. So I'm going to erase these for a minute just to kind of go, and we'll see a couple examples. So remember, later on, at some point, you're going to look at this and go like, what is sine again? Sine is literally just a ratio. So we're going to look here. So what's going to happen is I want to make sure that I use those 3 terms. What do they mean? So here, what we're going to see a lot of is Greek letters. So we have theta and we have alpha. Theta and alpha. So when I do sine, cosine, tangent, I have to figure out which angle I'm using. So let's only focus on theta. So if I focus on theta, then I really don't care about alpha. It's gone. So what I'm going to look at is I want to figure out what the opposite is, the adjacent is, and the hypotenuse. So my opposite is always going to be across from it. So if I look, my opposite, I go straight across. That's my opposite always. Adjacent is a fancy way of saying next to. So it's the one right next to my angle. So it's touching my angle. And you say, Mr. Hyde, the other one's touching it too, but remember from geometry, that's always going to be our hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is always across from our right angle. So always across from our right angle is the hypotenuse. Opposite of the angle is opposite, and touching the angle or next to the angle is going to be adjacent. So those are the basic terms. So if I come here and say, I want to find the 6 trig functions of theta, and I want to care about theta, not alpha. So I can ignore alpha completely here. It doesn't need to be there at all. So here's what I'm going to look at. I want to find the 6 trig functions: sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, cotangent. And there are my ratios. So if I look at this for a minute, I can look at this and say, okay, those are what the ratio is. I'm talking about theta. So opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. So if I look at sine of theta, my sine of my theta is opposite over hypotenuse. So it's just going to be this idea of 12 over 13. My cosine is going to be the adjacent. All right, so I'm sorry, I switched the numbers. The adjacent, which is 5, my hypotenuse, which was 13. So I have 5 over 13. And finally, my tangent is opposite 12 over the adjacent, which is 5. And then from here, I don't have to do much. Remember, cosecant, secant, cotangent are just these three flipped upside down. So 13 over 12, then 13 over 5, and then 5 over 12. And that's giving my 6 trig functions. I have to memorize those things for the test. Sa, ga, toa, or Oscar had a hangover on alcohol. So however I want to kind of do it. All right. So if I did the exact same thing for alpha, right, it would just be a little different. So here's alpha. Opposite is 5. Hypotenuse is 13. Cosine is going to be adjacent, which is next to it. And hypotenuse is 13. Tangent, opposite is 5. Adjacent is 12. And then it's just those three flipped. That's pretty much it. So give that a try, see how you do in the Khan Academy, and then just let me know how I can help during Power Block. Send me an email. Good luck.